We can get started then. I mean, it's 6:01, so we might as well get started. I mean, the boards aren't here, but you guys don't need it for now. But hello, welcome back to Beginner Chess. You guys know me, hopefully. I'm Naranjan, I'm the Wellbeing Officer for Chess Society. It's been a while since I've done one of these. As I said, I went back home for reading week, so I didn't get to do one last week, but we should be fine. Should be okay. Basically, we're going to continue off from what we did last week. So we talked about the Caro-Kann last time. I keep saying last week, it's not last week, it was the week before. But essentially we're looking at the Caro-Kann Defence for black. And today we're going to carry on with that, but look at it from white's point of view. So essentially looking at how we play against the Caro-Kann. And there's going to be some people from the SU coming along today, like just taking photos, because we've won an award apparently, so that's great. But they're not here as well, so they'll come along later today. If you guys are okay with that, like with the photos, then you can like step out if you want. But if you're okay with it, you're more than welcome to stay. But yeah, openings 4. Hope you guys enjoy. I've got some learning objectives. Basically, as I mentioned, like we're gonna talk about how we're gonna play against the Caro-Kann Defence for white, and we're going to look at 2 ways of doing this. So we're going to look at the fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann. I know you guys were very interested in that last time. I think you mentioned like last time when we were doing the games, like what's the fantasy variation? So I'm going into more detail because of that. And another one that I'm going to do is the 2 knights defense. So it's in the name. You defend the Caro-Kann with 2 knights, but I'll show you how to do that pretty much. First of all, I just want to do a little bit of a recap of what last week's session was and the previous 2 opening lessons in the first semester. Basically, what is the opening? The opening is the very first couple of moves in a chess game, and it basically determines where, or you're basically trying to figure out where all your pieces go. You're trying to bring them all into the action as quickly as possible, pretty much. And openings come in all different shapes and sizes. This is an example. So this is the London system that we looked at in semester 1, and this is the Caro-Kann Defence for black. So you remember this C6 and D5 opening, pretty much. And yeah, openings come in all different shapes and sizes. You've got the English, you've got the London system, like we talked about in semester 1. You've got the Dutch defence, the semi-Slav. You've got the intercontinental ballistic missile, which I saw in an Eric Rosen video, and I still don't know what it is. Apparently it's very funny, but I don't know. You got all these different stuff, and essentially we're just going to look at the Caro-Kann defense for white, pretty much, so playing against the Caro-Kann. And this is my favorite of them all, the Vienna Gambit. If I'm playing as white, 99% of my games have been with this. It is my bread and butter. It is the greatest opening, I think, personally. And as we mentioned in 2 weeks ago's session, the Caro-Kann is basically an opening for black, where essentially you're responding to white's e4 and d4 pawns being in the center. So white has taken up both pawns in the center, controlling the entire center, but then if we're playing as black, we want to try and get rid of the center from white, and take it from white and then getting the center with black, pretty much. So remember, it's e4, c6, d4, and d5. And that's basically what the Caro-Kann is. Like, there's 4 ways of white playing against this. I say 4, but like the 4 main ways. You can like hang your queen in like 2 moves, probably. That's another way of playing it, but it's okay. Hello. Yeah, hello. Nice to meet you. No, it's all good. It's all good. Oh no, we're doing the lesson today. So like you can sit in and like take photos and videos of whatever you want. But yeah, like I was saying, basically white can play 4 different types of stuff against the Caro-Kann. They can play pawn e5, you can play pawn takes d5, you can play knight c3 or knight d2, the classical variation, or you can play the pawn f3, which is the fantasy variation. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you guys today about, the fantasy variation. And I'm also going to tell you about something that isn't on here, so it isn't something that we taught in last week's or 2 weeks ago's lesson, which is a 2 knights defense, or 2 knights attack even, not the defense, because we're attacking with it, yeah. And that's the reason why I didn't include that in last time's session is because actually we don't push these 2 pawns, we only push one of them, and we bring out both knights afterwards. But again, I'll get onto that later on. But let's start with the fantasy variation, first of all. Remember that the fantasy variation is after the move f3, so we build these 2 pawns in the center, and we play this move f3. And essentially the reason why we play this move f3 is to basically reinforce the center, right? If we're playing as black, we want to try and get rid of these 2 pawns in the center by taking this e-pawn over here. But if we reinforce this e-pawn with this f-pawn over here, if black ever captures this pawn, we recapture again, and we still have control of the center, whereas black has basically nothing, right? We have the center, whereas black doesn't have much. And personally, this is probably the most fun way of playing against the Caro-Kann Defence. It's my personal favorite. I had a game like last month against Loughborough, so in the LRCA games, the Leicester Chess League, or Leicester and Rutland Chess Association, and it was one of the greatest games I've ever played. And I played white, I played the fantasy variation. I played it a bit inaccurately. Fraser over here, he knows the fantasy a lot better than I do. And I showed him my game, and he was like, why did you play this move? And I'll show you it later, but I ended up having a really good game, and I won the game, actually, so that's very good. But basically, just to reiterate, we're playing this move f3, basically to reinforce the center. If black ever takes this pawn, we take back, and we have control of the center. Hello guys, take a seat. So, after this exchange, basically, so remember that black wants to capture this pawn, and we capture back with our f-pawn, and we take the entire center, basically. The only way to ensure that black isn't completely losing is if black plays this move, e5, basically. And the reason why black plays e5 is because if we play any other move, like knight f6, for example, this is completely lost, and I'm going to show you in a second why. So let's say we've got into this position, right? They play something like knight c6, knight f6, sorry. Can anyone tell me why this is a bad move? First of all, why is bringing this knight into the center a bad move? You play e5, exactly. So you can just push this pawn directly into the center. And this knight is under attack. We have to bring it back. Notice how you can't bring it to over here because, again, we have this queen over here. Sorry, this queen defending all of these squares. So the only decent place to bring this knight back is to over here. And this is really bad for black. As you can already see, it's plus 1.2 for white, which means like white has 1 point of an advantage. Even though they don't have any material advantage, they have a complete space domination. So we have control over the entire center, if that makes sense. So basically, this is why black plays e5 immediately, just to prevent, let's say if this happens, just to prevent us from going e5, right? They play e5 here, and this is the main line of the fantasy, pretty much. Let me go back onto this. And as I mentioned, we play e5 just to prevent us from playing e5. And again, as I mentioned, bringing this knight over here is bad, and we can take advantage of it by pushing this e5 pawn. Yep, as I mentioned, I kind of went too quickly. I didn't show you the slides, but it's okay. And we can actually see the power of pawn e5 in other positions as well in the Caro-Kann. So this is a position that we reached before. So instead of capturing this pawn and recapturing, if black ever plays this move, knight f6 here, again we play the move e5 and kicking out the knight to this square again. You can play knight here as well. Remember, the difference was that the queen could see this square, but now we can't because of this pawn here. But it's basically the same thing. Like we can. Oh. So if they play knight here, we can still push this e5 pawn, and they develop back. Oh, not develop, underdevelop, and we can play this move f4. Basically having this entire center. It's not as good as it was before because we've wasted a move, I guess. But again, we have this huge space advantage pretty much. Let me go back. And I mentioned here, like, we can play this move pawn f4, as I mentioned, having this huge center of pawns, pretty much. And I mentioned that it's completely winning, with a little bit of asterisk here, because no chess position is ever completely winning. You still got to know how to convert the entire position. So there's just something to note as well. Even though it is very much advantageous for white, you still got to know how to convert it, pretty much. So instead of us playing pawn e5, as I mentioned before, like, black has to play this move pawn e5 immediately, just to prevent us from playing the move. And also, another reason why they would play e5 is to challenge this d4 pawn over here. So notice how actually black has two attackers on this pawn. So if I go back to this position, if we capture and play this move d4, e5, sorry. This d4 pawn over here is being threatened twice compared to us defending it once. So basically black is threatening to take this. So does anyone have any ideas of how we can sort of defend this pawn as well, whilst bringing another piece into the game? Any ideas? I appreciate that I'm going a little bit quickly. Like, I haven't had much practice of this. Like, again, it's been 2 weeks, but F3? F3, there's...
Oh, with the knight.
With the knight, yeah, exactly. There's no pawn F3, so it is this move, exactly. Why is it pawn, why is it knight F3? What's good about the move? Yeah, two knights defense, so...
also, it pulls someone forwards, they're protected by the queen, and it also protects the pawn, and you gain a few spaces. It
Yeah.
also threatens their pawn, which is quite nice.
Exactly. So this is a double-edged attack and defense as well. So bringing the knight to the center is always a good thing because, as I mentioned in a couple of my sessions before, like, bring the knights out to the center is a great way of challenging the center, pretty much. And we can see that this knight move over here not only defends our d4 pawn, but also, as you mentioned, it attacks this pawn. So the pawn that they pushed here, we're basically attacking it, saying that, why did you push this pawn? I want it, basically. I want the entire center. So, is there any way that black can defend this pawn, by any chance? Any ideas? F6? F6 is an idea, yeah. They can defend it like this, so just to reiterate, this is the move pawn F6. But actually this isn't a great move, because what about this knight? Where does this knight want to go later on in the game? Yeah, exactly. So it wants to go towards the center, but bringing the pawn to this f6 square means that the knight can't go there. So the only way it can get to the center is playing here, which weakens this bishop, I suppose. Again, I appreciate that this is a bit technical, but once you get the hang of it, I think, like, with a bit of practice, I'm sure you guys will be able to get it as well. But the move that I was looking for actually was actually taking this pawn. Because taking this pawn, you can't really defend this pawn for black without really weakening your own position. So as I mentioned, this f6 move really weakens your position. So the only way to get rid of it is just to get rid of it, basically, just capturing in the center. Let me go back to the slides because I have prepared something about this. So e6, d4. Basically saying, like, there is no way that I'm going to capture this, defend this pawn without, like, having a detrimental negative impact on black's position. So they get rid of the pawn and it's a liability for them, basically. And basically, a lot of you might be tempted to capture this pawn in the center, so play knight takes d4. But actually this is wrong, and I've got two questions for you guys. Why is this move a bad move? Like, what move for black gains them an advantage if knight takes d4 is played? And instead of knight takes d4, what else could they play? So I'll go back to this position. Why is knight takes d4 a bad move? And what else could they play instead? Yeah, okay. So let me go back to the... So we got to this position, basically, and I'm trying to figure out why this is a bad move. And you've mentioned that there's a queen check, right? So what is that move? Queen h4 check, exactly. So this is a really good move for black, basically, because not only does it check the king, so attacking the king, it also attacks this pawn at the same time. And this is what we call a fork, basically. So a queen attacking two things at the same time, pretty much. And if you notice before, let's say if we play like a waiting move, you can't play this queen check anymore because this knight defends this square. So that's why bringing this knight to the center, stopping the attack, stopping the defense of this square, means that we can just capture this, basically. So instead of knight takes d4, what else can we play? Any ideas? Any suggestions? Yeah? Bishop c4, exactly. So bishop c4 is this move over here. And let me go back to the thing again. So as I mentioned, this queen check is detrimental, basically, because again it forks the king and the e4 pawn in the center. Actually, there's something else that I wanted to show you as well in this position. So after this knight takes, if we try and defend both of these at the same time, we can't really do that because, again, like, there's no way of defending both of these at the same time. So the king takes priority, right? The king is the most important piece. Let's say if we play this move, g3, why is this also a bad move? Sorry, what do you say? Exactly, yeah. So what's the move? Queen takes e4, yes, exactly. So remember that this fork over here attacked both the king and the pawn. So even though we've stopped defending, we've stopped the queen being attacked by the king. Sorry, the other way around, the king being attacked by the queen. This pawn is still under attack, so we can still capture this pawn in the center. And this also is really bad because not only does it attack the king, it attacks the rook at the same time, and you're going to lose the rook, pretty much. That's what I wanted to show you. Like, even though the fantasy is still one of the most fun ways of playing, you're still prone to traps, basically. So you got to be extremely careful. It's one of the most sharpest ways of playing against the Caro-Kann. So again, always be careful of these queen checks. And as I mentioned before, so bishop c4 basically is the best way of playing against this. You can play queen takes d4, and as I mentioned in that Loughborough game that I played in the Leicester Chess Association League, I played this move. So I played, let me go back. I actually played this move over here, and Fraser doesn't like this move, so I showed him this game, and he was like, why the hell did you play queen takes d4? And, well, yeah, it was fine, but you can still play this, you can still get away with this game. I managed to win this game anyway, it was completely fine. The computer says it's basically equal, so, again, but the main lines is to play this bishop move. And basically, the future plans of the fantasy variation after you get to this position is basically what you want to do is you want to castle your king. Essentially what this means is, if you don't know what castling is essentially swapping the rook and the king over. basically hopping over each other, pretty much. And essentially what this does is that, remember, it brings the king to the edge of the board, where it's usually the safest. And it also brings this rook to this f-file. Let me show you on the thing as well. So after bishop here, our ideas are castling here. We're also going to bring this knight to this square over here, so knight g5. And these three pieces combined, they're all going to target this one pawn over here. So as you can see, we have really good synergy between all of our pieces. They're all targeting this one f7 pawn, basically. We've got the bishop staring at it. If we play knight g5, the knight also stares at it as well. And because we got rid of this f pawn early on, so when we captured this way, we also get this, the semi-open f-file is what we call. And it's called a semi-open f-file because there's basically nothing left on this file, this f-file. If we play this move knight g5, then this becomes an open f-file pretty much. And essentially we're going to hurtle down all of our pieces at this f7 pawn and basically try to checkmate the opponent's king pretty much. This king and this pawn, so this pawn is only defended by this king. So technically it's the weakest part of the enemy's position. So essentially we're just going to go all in after that pawn pretty much. So that's the fantasy pretty much. That is the fantasy variation. And I just wanted to show you, like, we have two pieces out. We're going to castle. We have really good active squares for all of our pieces pretty much. Whereas if you notice for black, they have all of their pieces on the back rank pretty much. They have the knights, the bishops, the rooks, the king and the queen. They're all in the back rank. And they've got this d4 pawn over here. And it's also a weakness as well because it's not defended by anything. So if we sort of like switch up our plan, so if we don't go for this f7 pawn, we can always target this d4 pawn and sort of strangle our opponents with this weakness pretty much. We put so much immense pressure on that pawn. Eventually we're going to capture it and black's position is just going to topple over pretty much. But that's the fantasy variation. So I mentioned that I'm going to tell you guys about two different things. So I've told you about the fantasy variation, and now we're going to talk about the two knights attack. It's in the name pretty much, so we're going to be attacking the Caro-Kann with two knights. It's a very solid response compared to the fantasy variation because it involves putting all your pieces on really solid squares, so not really going for like a huge attack down the f-file or whatever. You're just playing normal solid chess. You're not going for anything risky, I suppose. And as I mentioned before, like in the two knights attack, we don't put both our pawns in the center. We actually get to a position where we don't push this d4 pawn. We bring both our knights into the center. And black can play a bunch of different ways against this. So they can play something like bishop g4. They can take this pawn. They can play this move e6. You can play basically anything against the two knights attack for black. But for the sake of time, I'm going to talk about two moves, which is d takes e4, so taking this pawn in the center, and this move bishop g4 as well. Are you guys happy with the session so far? Like, is there anything that we want to cover? Like maybe in the fantasy, were there like any questions before we get started with the two knights? Did it make sense? Yeah? Okay. We can move on to the two knights then. So let me show you on the board as well, because I find it to be a lot easier to do it on here. So remember, we don't play both of these pawns in the center. We actually, after c6, we play this move, knight c3. And the reason why is, again, it's in the name, we're bringing both the knights to the center. And after the move d5, we bring the second knight. And black can respond in two different ways, or many different ways, but we're going to talk about two different ways right now. I think the first one that I mentioned was d takes e4. Yep. So I'll show you on here. So d takes e4, basically taking this pawn in the center. And the next move is basically taking this pawn back, because again, if we don't take this pawn, then we're just going to lose our knight, pretty much. So this is a free pawn. I say free pawn, it's not really a free pawn, because they've captured. So we take the pawn, pretty much. And after knight here, the best way that black usually plays is this move, bishop f5. It's simultaneously attacking our knight and developing the bishop at the same time. So it seems like a pretty decent move, right? It seems pretty logical, but actually this is the mistake. This is the mistake. And let me go back to the slides, because actually we see this kind of situation in the classical variation of the Caro-Kann, which I mentioned in the session that we did last time. So bishop f5 is a mistake in this position against the two knights, whereas in the classical variation it's actually the main line. And I'm going to show you the reason why is because we can actually bring our knight back to this square g3, attacking this knight, this bishop at the same time. If they play the move bishop g6, so bringing it back, we basically hurtle all of our pieces at this bishop and essentially rendering it useless. And let me show you this actually. Oops, I don't need AI. I've got a little spot the difference task for you guys. This side over here is the classical variation of the Caro-Kann, where we get a similar position where we play this move h4, trying to get this bishop. And this is a two knights attack, where we're also playing this move h4, trying to get the bishop. But what's the difference between these two positions? Why is one of them, so the classical variation, why is that good, and why is the two knights attack bad? What's the difference between the two? Any ideas? Yeah?
The bishop can't move in the two knight attack. Sub-free is very.
So which bishop, sorry?
The two knight attack bishop can't move at all
The,
without going somewhere dangerous.
this one?
Yeah.
Okay. But like, you're thinking far ahead, so like where other pieces can move and so and so. But like physically on the board right now, what's the difference? Exactly. The knight on f3 is a difference. In the classical variation, they've got this knight on g1. Basically, it hasn't been brought to the center of the board. Whereas the f3 knight in the classical, not in the classical, in the two knights, it's been brought to the center. So we can use this to our advantage. Actually, we can drive this knight, this f3 knight, into the center, basically hurtling all of our pieces, attacking this light squared bishop, basically. If ever black retreats the bishop, so they bring it back over here, then I'll show you that afterwards, but essentially we can basically blind this bishop and get a really nice position. In the classical variation, we don't have this knight f3 knight over here, so we can't bring the knight to the center. So let me show you that as well. So we bring the knight back, attacking this. If they ever bring the bishop back, then we play this move, h4. They're always going to play h6, trying to get the bishop back over here. Note that we don't actually want to play this move h5, because that stops our initiative. And I'll show you the reason why, because there's a better way of doing this, pretty much. So as I mentioned, we play this move, knight e5. If they ever bring the bishop back, we play this really nice move, queen here, queen h5. What's the idea of that move? Anyone got any ideas? Yeah? F7, exactly. So let's say if black plays a waiting move, they play some random move over here, it is checkmate in one, because we capture this pawn, and this king has nowhere to go. We can't bring it here, because this knight over here defends this square. So that is checkmate. So essentially we're threatening this pawn in the this f7 pawn again. And the best way to defend it is actually this move, pawn here, pretty much. And this is really bad for black because, as you can see, this bishop it's been suffocated in its own pawns, pretty much. And we've got this move, queen f3 again, trying to get this same threat again on the f7 square. And basically white is just so much better here. Like you can already see it's +2, and we haven't even won any material, right? We're crushing pretty much. All of their pieces except this bishop are on the back row, and this bishop over here is just completely walled in pretty much. Let me go back to the. Actually, I was going to show you the classical variation as well. So we see the sort of a similar idea in the classical variation. So this is the classical variation. Remember, we bring the knight to the center. We can either play this move or this move. I mentioned this in the previous session as well. So after this capture, we sort of get a similar position like this, where the knight is attacking this bishop, but we bring the bishop back, and then we go for this advance, pretty much. Notice how we don't have this knight anymore, so this is pretty much equal. This is the main line, pretty much. So the f3 knight is extremely important in the two knights attack. And again, we have threats on f7. We're trying to get this f7 pawn, and we have a really huge advantage, pretty much. There's also a line where you can play this move queen d5 as well, trying to defend this pawn as well. But as I mentioned here, we can play this move bishop c4. Essentially, skewering is called a skewer. Think of it as like a chicken skewer as well. You know, you're basically attacking multiple things at the same time. This queen is under attack, and if it moves, then we have even more pressure on f7 with this bishop as well. So let me just show you on the board as well. So two knights. If we take, we bring the bishop here, we bring it back, we play this move h4, and we bring the knight to the center, and we play this move queen here. If they ever play this move queen d5, we play this move bishop c4, doing this skewer tactic. And again, if you're not familiar with this sort of stuff, I recommend going over it again. Just take it like step by step, pretty much. If there's anything you didn't understand, like go over it again in your own time. And if you got any questions later on, you can always come to me or any of the committee members, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as well. But basically, like the two knights attack can be really devastating because of situations like this. Obviously, you're not going to get positions like this all the time. This is just a position that can happen. So it's better to know the ideas of the position rather than just the traps, I suppose. And this is a really nice position because all of our pieces are really nicely harmonized with each other. So this knight over here is defended by our queen. This bishop is defended by our knight. And this queen is protected by our knight as well. Everything's sort of interconnected, everything's defending each other and doing their best, pretty much. And as I mentioned here, the evaluation is +4 for white, so completely crushing. Now the other way that black can play against the two knights defense is this move bishop g4, and this is probably the most solid way you can play against the two knights attack if you're playing as black. Basically, you just play normal chess if you play bishop g4, if you face bishop g4 even. And the reason why we play this move bishop e2 is because essentially black wants to destabilize our position. What does that mean? Well, essentially, if ever black takes this knight over here, then we're going to have to take back with this pawn or with the queen. And this queen over here on this square is not great placed because, as I mentioned before, like you don't really want to bring your queen out early. It always becomes a threat. So essentially black wants to destabilize our position. So we bring the bishop to e2. If black ever takes our knight, we take back with the bishop. And the bishop's far more suited on that square, pretty much. And also it prepares castling as well, so bringing the king to the corner of the board. Again, like it's a bit more difficult, I'd say, because this is kind of a lot more solid playing, pretty much. So I'd recommend going over this in your own time, pretty much, and sort of figuring out everything, as in like figuring out all the different lines and moves that black can play, pretty much. And I just want to end with this final thing as well. Basically, a lot of people that play with black in this position, they're kind of tempted to play this move d4, but actually it's not a good idea. Does anyone have any ideas of why this pawn d4 move in this position is a bad idea? And what can white play to take advantage of this mistake? Any ideas? No? It's okay, I can tell you. Basically, this move is really bad because even though it does attack this knight, a lot of people, if they're playing as white, they may think that, oh, my knight's being attacked and I've got to move it. But actually, this is a fake threat. This is a completely empty threat because we can play this move, knight takes d4. And the reason we can play knight takes d4 is because even though we've got all of this tension going on in the center, so this bishops are staring at each other, this queen is staring at this knight as well, there's actually a really nice move sequence, and I'm going to show it to you over here. So if you go back to this position, we play this move bishop g4. Remember, we play this move bishop e2, just breaking the pin and basically just putting the bishop on a better square. This is a bad move, remember, because we can take this. Even though the queen can take this, it seems like it's a completely free pawn, a free knight actually, but actually this bishop over here is hanging right now. So we can actually capture this bishop, and we've won a free pawn in the center pretty much. And you can see the evaluation is already +2, and we're up 1 pawn. Now let's say if we play bishop takes bishop, this knight can always drop back and recapture again. And again, we're already at 1 point of material, and the evaluation over here says +2. And essentially what I want to tell you is basically, I mentioned before, like, oh, my battery is running low. What I mentioned before is like, this is a very solid way of playing against the Caro-Kann pretty much. Essentially, you've got to figure out how to play normal chess in this position. You bring all your pieces to the center, you castle your king, and you have a relatively normal game of chess. The only reason why it's slightly better for white is because if you look at this position, we've got 3 pieces out compared to black's only bishop over here. So we've got these 2 knights out, we've got the bishop out as well. We can castle our king really quickly, and essentially we have a slightly better position because we have all of our pieces out compared to black. And we can, because of this, we can call the shots pretty much. We're the ones that force the attacks on our opponents rather than them calling the shots on us. And as long as, and 99% of the time you're going to win pretty much. And it's your turn now. It is your turn. We've got 20 minutes left of the session, and essentially what I want you guys to do is basically pair up against each other and practice some of these variations that I taught you about. So the fantasy variation, you can learn about the fantasy variation, and we can do the 2 knights defense as well. And if you ever get bored of something and you want your opponent to try it, then you can always swap around, you can swap the colors. And again, if you got any questions about any of the content that we taught, then please do ask. That's what we're here for. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate that you guys have come along. And again, if you got any questions, please let me know. But thank you guys. Yeah, I did not edit this. There's no Endgames 4 lesson on the 2nd of February. That's already happened. But yeah, just pair up pretty much and like try and figure out all of these different positions. And I'll come around and like just ask you guys questions as well.